right now we have Stephen Richardson, VP, Product Strategy and Business Solutions of Fireblocks, to share with us on the topic of lessons learned from transferring $150 billion in digital assets in 15 months.
Thank you for inviting me here today to talk to you about Fireblocks, and in a particularly interesting case study about how the Fireblocks platform has enabled our customers in a little over the last 15 months to transfer now over $200 billion of digital assets. And what we'd like to do is take some time to walk through some of the lessons that we learned with our customers as we developed the solution, given all the chatter in the space about new traditional financial markets firms and traditional firms entering the digital market space. My name is Stephen Richardson. I'm the head of product strategy and business solutions at Fireblocks, and I'll be spending the next 20 minutes with you, taking you through some of the insights from the Fireblocks team. Now, there's probably a question in terms of who is this company that has now been critical infrastructure for such a large volume of assets that have moved? I wanted to give you a little bit of context on who we are. Given our go-to-market date from April of 2019, we've been a company that's raised approximately $46 million. But critically and more importantly, we've been a company and a platform that has enabled our customers to transfer over $200 billion of digital assets since April of 2019. This encompasses over 130 customers that we work with on a daily basis to execute the business solutions and the business objectives that they have. We have a range of customers from challenger banks such as Revolut, digital incumbents such as Galaxy and Genesis, to FX brokers such as GMO in Japan, and lenders such as Celsius. What we also found and what we've also seen is we service a wide range of customer segments. And that wide range of customer segments will come into play as we go through this case study. So we've serviced customers from custodians to lending providers, banks, and a range of other financial institutions within the digital space. Now, I think everyone understands that digital assets present a great opportunity for financial institutions. And as we've seen, there's over $100 billion plus opportunity in this space. But the key and critical components become, how do you really start to engage with digital assets in a secure and scalable way? Now, the approach that we took from a product perspective at Fireblocks was really around evaluating market segments that we think were critical, enabling the capital market use cases for digital assets. And what we did is we identified certain anchor customers within these market segments, and we really started to think about a few key questions. The first is, what were the challenges that they faced in order to actually engage with digital assets? If you think about the operations of digital assets, you think about the technology risks around digital assets, we really wanted to understand, as they looked through business solutions, what was keeping them from launching successful products or growing successful products. The second thing were, what were the constraints to business growth? How is the market changing? How are their teams changing? How is the product and technology changing? And what were the things that were constraining the business from then growing overall? And then the third and final point was, what were the specific business objectives and the things that were unique service propositions that each one of these customers and each one of these segments had that became critical in reinforcing from an underlying technology platform? And when we started to think about those three questions and those three layers, you then got towards an infrastructural component that really then started to develop what we saw in the Fireblocks platform and how we've been able to service our customers. Now, what I wanted to do is provide a little bit of a level setting context on what we've seen in terms of a product perspective within the digital asset space. As you look at 2020, 2021, and 2022, we've kind of seen an emergence of some key concepts from financial institutions. First and foremost, the ability to offer scalable storage, the ability to execute compliance and AML KYT to satisfy regulators, and the critical need to settle and enable settlement of digital assets. As you shift towards 2021, you start to look at security tokens, DeFi, and the integration of broader smart contracts for business purposes. And then as you start to leverage the 2022 sphere, we really start to see payments, remittance services, and the growth of lending within the digital space as something that becomes critically important. Now, understanding that roadmap for development, there's a real question as to digital assets and the security and vulnerability of digital assets, right? We started talking with our customers about these business objectives, and what we started to see was it really focused on two key components, right? The first was the idea of wallet compromise and the assets being, basically compromised by the financial institution itself or from the financial institution. And the second was the transfer spoofing, the idea that as I move assets from point A to point B, there's an opportunity for someone to step in the middle and actually reroute the assets given the immutability of the blockchain. And so there were some real key questions in terms of how do you build private key, public key infrastructure that can withstand internal and external attacks, right? How do you build a platform with SLAs that can support capital markets use cases and payments use cases in a world that operates at a 24/7 basis? And third is how do you create a platform that integrates with core banking systems and internal infrastructure such that there is a smooth transition to go towards market? And those critical problems were something that we saw not only in the natively digital players, but within challenger organizations that have pretty forward-thinking digital applications. Now, as we boil those problems down, we actually started to see three universal challenges. And those really were around what we call core tenets that were used to build the Fireblocks platform. The first is that security is everything in terms of reputation. Any operational errors in the security of transferring a digital asset can be disastrous for the firm, no matter how great the idea or concept from a business perspective. The second piece was that time is money, right? In a ever-evolving ecosystem where assets are moving 24/7, liquidity is distributed, and there are opportunities to generate revenue in ways that have never been seen before, the idea that delays in settlement or the delays in pulling of assets become a critical blocker towards revenue growth was something that was a high challenge. And while we believed that old technology was quite secure, it was something that could not be efficiently scaled to meet the business needs of our customers. And then the last and final component as we thought through this was that new systems must include organizational operations and compliance needs. Regulators are getting more and more comfortable with the idea of digital assets, but it's an imperative to the organization to support, regulatory clarity and be transparent and open in operations. And so the ability to integrate things like AML and KYT as a basis of ongoing operations was a critical component that needed to be addressed. Now, as we think through this, we know that financial institutions are shifting their thinking. And we can think about the challenges that leading digital institutions are facing as they engage with digital markets and digital assets. But we see that this is even more critical and complex when you look at traditional financial institutions. There's some significant challenges in terms of settlement with centralized clearing models within the traditional institutional space, and that the infrastructure is not currently set up to support things like 24/7 operations. These things lead to opportunities lost from a revenue perspective and the inability to control assets in a bespoke and distinct way to support business objectives, which will lead to losses in revenue and the ability to not respond to volatility in the markets. And so the critical question becomes, how do you really transform yourself into a digital asset services business given the challenges that exist within the legacy organization? Now, what happened from that is that we really started to then apply these challenges and these questions in terms of building the Fireblocks platform and the support of our customers. And what you see as a basis is a platform that was developed with a few critical components in mind, and you'll see those map back to the challenges that we talked about previously. The first is that we built it with defense in depth security, not just one layer of technology security that in essence provided a risk mitigation for an attack from external vectors, but also thinking through all the components, both internal and external, as a basis of offering a platform. And then the third and most critical component is that this blockchain platform had to work across public and private blockchains as a mechanism of providing the kind of scalability that our traditional financial institutions and our customers needed. Now, what we started to map towards were three critical components of the Fireblocks infrastructure. The first and foremost is the network. The network concept is a secure attestation and communication layer that ensures and aids in settlement of digital assets. Now, as we talked about previously, settlement is a critical component of enabling business operations in the digital asset space. And so developing a network and communication layer that simplified settlements between counterparties was a critical component of what was built. The second piece was the digital vault, the high-level storage and issuance vault that is built within high SLA storage and defense-in-depth technology. We utilize both protocols such as multi-party computation as a means of distributing risk around the storage of secure assets, of digital assets. And the second piece is utilizing of Intel SGX to provide a hardware component to the entire platform. And so this ability to provide a vault that in essence secured those digital assets at scale was a critical component that was implemented. And then the final piece was really around the enterprise grade structure. As we think about the different companies, both emergent digital companies, challenger banks, traditional financial institutions, the ability to have an enterprise grade platform is critical. And the ability to go to regulators and engage them with a service and technology provider that meets those needs from an enterprise platform perspective is also important. So we are a SaaS and PaaS-based platform with SOC 2 Type 2 compliance and pen tested and insured as well. Now, what I'll step into is a high-level architecture of the Fireblocks platform, where you'll get a clear picture of how all these components come together to provide a leading-edge platform. On the left, you will see the MPC hardware vault, which can be globally distributed or serviced on-prem. And the idea here is that you're providing a secure infrastructure for holding those digital assets. Okay, the second piece is the API components, which you will see at the top level of the screen. The ability for this platform to interact with things like core banking technology, dashboards and infrastructure, AML KYT providers, as well as auditory functions becomes a critical component in ensuring that basically this platform can be leveraged at scale within the constraints of the existing business. And then the final piece you'll see is the Fireblocks network. And as I mentioned, this is the secure communication layer that ensures that settlement can happen between the Fireblocks platform and its users and external venues. So you'll see exchanges, liquidity providers, third-party custodians, and customers are all interconnected within this network concept, which adds a certain level of scale as you think about the growth of business operations within different business products. Now, one area we'd like to focus on is the idea of the asset transfer network. And you'll see that come into play as we go through the outcomes of this particular case study. When you think about one of the biggest risks in moving assets, it is the idea that as you move an asset from point A to point B, it does not get to your intended destination. And so something that layers on an additional, basically, protocol layer to ensure that settlement and ensure the effective movement of those digital assets is critical. This asset transfer network needs to mitigate things like man-in-the-middle attacks and insider attacks. It needs to enable movement of digital assets for settlement securely and at scale. And it needs to have a robust policy engine that helps to ensure things like finality and control internally within the organization. You'll also see that the Fireblocks platform has integrated the idea of token issuance and management. And so in essence, as you think about the base layer and construct of the Fireblocks platform and its core platform, the idea that you can integrate additional solutions such as the issuance and distribution of tokens securely and effectively becomes another critical component in how our customers are not only using the Fireblocks platform, but how they're able to leverage the platform at scale. And the final piece before we go into some of the critical outcomes is the idea that this platform needs to be in a very tight constructed manner, right? You can deploy this architecture in a SaaS-based platform. You can deploy it as a hybrid, or in the case of a lot of traditional financial institutions, you can deploy this infrastructure on premises. The flexibility to deploy this architecture in a multifaceted way is critical in terms of ensuring that folks can run one, in parallel, but two, transition as needed and respond to changes in any regulatory regimes. Now, I've talked to you a bit about the construction of the Fireblocks platform, how we worked with our customers to build an effective solution, and how we really partner with our customers across all their different business cases. And what I really like to dig into is the outcomes that we were able to achieve with our customers utilizing these lessons learned. One of the critical components that you'll see here is that we have now moved something over $200 billion worth of assets and at a 30-day volume of $32 billion over 30 days. We're actually executing something like 350,000 transactions within that 30-day count, which is something to the likes of a transaction every 7.5 seconds. Now, this becomes a critical component and something to think about because the scale is enormous, right? The scale of basically executing that level of transactional volume is something that can only be done as we think through the layers and the challenges that were presented in the case above. As we think about how folks should engage in this digital asset space from a financial institution perspective, and given the scale that we've shown, we really came out with three critical components. The first is thinking about sub-custodial risk, right? All business cases have unique service propositions, right? They have unique value that they're adding in the space. And the idea of being constrained within a sub-custodial framework is something that we find has impeded the growth of a lot of our customers and led them to start to use Fireblocks as a basis of building out new business offerings and growing those business offerings. And so the idea that you can start to really bring in critical infrastructure within the organization and customize that infrastructure in a bespoke way is something that we think leading financial institutions should be thinking critically about. The second is selecting the best of breed for infrastructure. It is critical that you think about how this space is evolving. It is a fast evolving space, and the idea of partnering with a technology provider that focuses on being on the bleeding edge of that technology change and evolution is critical, right? You need to select a business partner that is thinking of how to future-proof the technology that you work with such that you can continue to be an innovator and offer critical offerings within the space. And the last is the focus on settlement operations. As we mentioned previously, as you think about $32 billion worth of assets being transferred in a month, $200 billion worth of assets being transferred over the course of 15 months, it is imperative that settlement operations are at the front of everything that is being done, right? And settlement operations present the biggest security and operational frictions within organizations today. So finding an organization and a platform that allows you to optimize this process is critical in terms of increasing things like asset turnover, which directly correlate to things like revenue growth. And so these are the three components that we see successful firms in the space and successful firms using the Fireblocks platform thinking through as they made this transition towards digital assets. Now, finally, we would like to share some key takeaways and learnings. One, we think that change isn't coming, it's already here. From challenger banks and organizations to natively digital firms, they're already engaging in this new and innovative process and way of thinking. The second is tech is not an enabler. It's not the transfer, is an enabler, but not the transition itself. So effective systems lanes change organization is critical and must be used as a part of thinking through this journey into digital assets. And I think this last two components really come together well. Thinking through all the various components of the organization, from security to compliance to operations, are important from an equal basis, right? And solving all those challenges become important in actually executing a product that makes change within the space. And so when you think about bringing all these components together, we really think that change can happen in parallel while working critically with key stakeholders in the business. I'd like to thank you so much for coming to this Fireblocks presentation. And if you'd like to get in touch, please email.